Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, lovely people. We have lots of you on Zoom and on the live stream. My name is Dharmendra Kanani. I'm Director of Insights, and I'll be moderating this morning's conversation with the Executive Vice President of the European Commission. Unfortunately, as with these times, when you have someone that big, she's currently in conversation with the President of the Commission, and therefore she's delayed. So she's absolutely forgiven. So I need you to be a bit more patient, as we are, and perhaps, there might be questions or issues you want to raise directly that you might want to signal right now. There's many of you already joined. So is there anyone in particular who'd like to just say, well, Dharmendra, I want to ask this one particular question just before she joins? We have so many of you. One thing to bear in mind is that those of you who are on Zoom, make sure you're muted. And until I call you, then you can unmute. But also, if you want to ask a question, any of you on Zoom, raise your virtual hand, and I will be able to see who I can take in the time that we've got. And obviously, we have Slido as well for our online viewers, if you like. So that's what the drill is. As I said, we're just waiting for the Commissioner, Executive Vice President, to be free to join us. And so my apologies for that. But I was going to say, who's out there that would like to raise a question? I can see we've got quite a few people that are pretty interesting in a number of ways. You're all interesting. I have a hand up. Right.
Yes, I would like to
Would you say, please, could you introduce yourself first?
Yes, I'm Maria Manuel Leitão Marques. I'm MEP from S&D Group,
Right.
IMCO Commission, Vice President of IMCO Commission.
Welcome.
And my question is about European strategy for data. I would like to know which concrete efforts are being made in order to make the common European health data space, which is mentioned in the European strategy, cut through as soon as possible, considering the situation we are living now.
Okay, good point. I'm sure there are many others who'd want to ask that question. That thing about data, how do we synergize but also make data coherent and shareable across Europe? Not just for health, but I think a number of areas. I'm very pleased to say, thank you for that. I'm very pleased to say that the Commissioner, the Executive Vice President, is free now and available and joined us. It gives me a lot of pleasure to welcome someone who is a big beast in the political circle and circus of Europe, someone who has done a number of things that have caught the attention not only of everybody in Europe, but also across the pond. She's been described as Silicon Valley's worst nightmare. And dear old Mr. Trump has referred to her as that tax lady who hates the US more than anyone else I've ever met. She also has some people who have a total crush on her because of her ability to manage politics so effectively, to advance causes that are dear to people's heart, and have the ability to call a spade a spade. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome Margrethe Vestager here with us, as a part of this In Conversation With online discussion by Friends of Europe. Margrethe, where are you? I can't see you. Do bear with us. As you know, we're all trialing these new online debates capacities. It's gone so well so far over the past few days. We're just having a little bit of difficulty.
I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm terribly sorry that I was late, but the morning meeting with the president took a little bit longer than expected.
Indeed, I warned everybody that we couldn't complain about that, Margrethe, because actually you're with the president of the Commission. So there we are.
Well, thank you very much for being patient, and I think indeed that is a good And for once, it's a proper excuse. It's very important to be with colleagues.
Yes.
Stella on health, Yanis on emergency, Thierry Breton on the industrial issues, Valdis and Paolo, myself on economic matters, so that everything is coordinated under the leadership of our president.
That's very good to know. You've just come out of that kind of conversation. I'm sure that's going to be heartening, but people have questions for you on that. Firstly, thank you again. And you heard my introductory remarks regarding you. I'd like to start a little bit on the personal level, if I may. We have so much spin these days that politicians are really kind of at odds with being able to be honest. They're so worried about focus groups or their ratings, but you never get under the skin of what it's like at this time for someone like you. And I wonder if you'd be able to share with us what it's been like. You're caught in the heart of a vortex of something which has shocked the whole world. We don't know what we're doing. We still don't know when it will end. We are trying our hardest. And suddenly you are someone with a huge portfolio and you're at the heart of it. Tell us what it's been like for you.
Well, first and foremost, it has been incredibly busy. It's really, we have a lot to do, and everything will have to be very fast. You know, you have human years and dog years. Here you have Corona weeks. Everything will have to be done so fast in such compressed time because people are suffering. Health systems are on the brink of breaking down, and people are losing their jobs. Businesses are losing their business. So we have to work in a very condensed way, very closely together. Mm-hmm. So it's very fast. And then at the same time, you know, one of the things that bothers me is people saying, let's make the most of this crisis. I really cannot stand that. We have a very specific job to do, which is to make sure that people stay healthy, that vulnerable people are not falling victim of this virus, that our health system, that our social contract with our society is still maintained, and that we can rebuild on the other side of this tremendous effort by so many people. And I think it's very important to come on the same very simple mission here, instead of trying to say, oh, now it's a chance to have more competence for the union or to re-evacuate the nation state or whatever. We have a very specific mission in these weeks.
This is probably one of the biggest leadership challenges in your life, as for many other people, in terms of actually how it, your past experience doesn't help you guide yourself into this particular situation. Any thoughts on this for other leaders and other people who are kind of grappling with a scenario of making sense of what we are dealing with right now?
Well, I think the most important thing, and that is something I have learned over years and years in working with people, is to trust people that they are on the same mission as you are. That they will do their utmost to do their job in the best possible way. And now, of course, under very difficult circumstances, I think we all admire all our health personnel, the people who take care of renovation, the cashier in the supermarket, the farmer who still makes sure that there is bread on the table. But I also see my staffers working round the clock with their children at home, worrying for parents and family. You know, as a rule, they live in another country, so they don't know how they are, how to keep them safe. And they also work round the clock to make sure that businesses can get very needed support and give it as a matter of urgency. And I admire that. And I think the leadership challenge here is to say, well, if you set the direction, then trust people to be part of that mission, because it turns out to be the truth. People are doing incredible things these days in order to make sure that we can push things forward.
Yes, it's amazing how at times of adversity, humanity comes into its own. You see random acts of kindness all around you, and it is humbling. Let's move to your portfolio. This is, as we said, one of the biggest professional leadership challenges you've probably come across in the context of the virus crisis. How is your portfolio adapting now to these circumstances? Because there's a here and now, but as The Economist, in particular, in this week's editorial, says that keeping an eye on the medium term is going to be critical. Otherwise, we're going to shackle ourselves to the past. Can you just say a little bit about your particular approach to your portfolio right now? There's data, there's the economy in terms of whether this is a defining moment for reshaping what our economics will be in the future, and whether we see the move to renationalizing of a lot of industry as a stepping point towards something else. So big questions, but I'll give you the time to kind of air your thoughts and views about what you're up to.
Well, the thing is that for the short-term response to work in full, I think it's important that people see that we are thinking about 6 months and 12 months and years from now, because then the short-term emergency, you can sort of use that with much more sort of comfort and trust that these are things that are put in motion and that will also work for you sort of more long-term. And one of the things that I have been dealing with from the very first day is to make sure that we still use one of the very fundamentals of our European Union, which is the single market. Because we see the dramatic effect when it doesn't work. When the first export bans came and border closures, you saw how value chains they were broken, how essential goods could not come over borders, and how 20, 40, 60 kilometers of queues, made it impossible for truck drivers to get the goods to the destination. So what we are doing is to make sure that while we support with an unprecedented level of support, and I think actually if you sum it all together, we do more than they do in the US, maybe in a slightly different way, but we do more, that we do use the single market and that we also preserve the single market, because when we come back and want to bounce back and get onto our feet again, and to do that in a green digital way, we really need the single market to work for us. And that is the long-term perspective, to make sure that the things that we will need to bounce back and recreate jobs and green our economy and be more digital, that we do not sacrifice this short term, because it is true, as also our president said in the parliament yesterday, you can only help yourself by helping others and doing it together. And I think that is the most important thing to work with as a tool to fight sort of the stress of the urgency, that you need to know that. This is why, for instance, the first thing we did was to start working on a temporary framework for state aid. And we did that within a week. The last time it was used was during the financial crisis.
Indeed.
And here it took 3 times as long to get there, to make sure that even though we give aid at an unprecedented level and at an unprecedented speed, that we are still sort of within the same framework, so that we do not fragment our union and split it apart in times where we indeed will need each other to rebuild.
I'm going to bring our very eager, connected, people who are on Zoom and on live stream to ask questions. But one of the issues and one of the criticisms has been that actually at this hurdle, this vital hurdle, we've not seen the market work, and we've not seen a union operate as one for all and all for one. And that's been one of the key issues, I think, for people on the street, and citizens will think, actually, Italians will feel, my goodness, I've been let down. The Spaniards will feel in different ways. And there's also the role of South Korea in supplying vital medical equipment. But let's come back to some of those, and I'm sure you'll have responses. But I've got a number of people. I've got Josephine Guob. Josephine, are you there? Okay. If you're not,
I am here.
are you hard there?
Yeah, I am.
Hi, please introduce yourself and be brief in your question to the Commissioner.
Thank you. I'll put my camera then Hi, my name is Josephine Gub. I'm CEO of TechFugees. We are an organization using technology to empower refugees and displaced people across the world. And I have a question regarding the use of data in this time of crisis. I wanted to know how it's being used to fight this coronavirus crisis and if there's any framework. Thank you.
And also thank you because you are also one of our European young leaders. So welcome to this conversation, and it's good to have you on part of the class of 2020 also. There are a number of questions around data. I'm going to take one other person because I think there's a question about how data is being used, not only for now, but in its implications for the future, Margrethe, that people have already raised before you joined. So I'm going to move now to Dave Keating. Dave, are you there?
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me?
I can. Say who you are. I mean, in terms of your background, and as I've already said, you're Dave Keating,
Great.
obviously.
Yeah. So I'm Dave Keating with France 24 and Forbes. I have a question for Vice President Vestager. In terms of the state aid framework going forward, you could argue that in some ways your state aid competence is on pause for the moment because state aid rules have been relaxed so much. What do you see as your job going forward in the next weeks or months while state aid rules are relaxed? Will your job be easier or harder?
But Dave, if I may, what's the point of your question? Is it you want? I mean, what's at the heart of your question, really, to the commissioner, other than the fact that it's been paused? Go on.
Yep. Is the scrutiny bit, is the work of the commission going to be more intense as you look at what qualifies and what doesn't qualify, or is the work of state aid going to be less?
Okay.
And the emphasis will be elsewhere.
Fine, great. I'm going to take one more, then I'm going to come back to the commissioner. Monica Frisoni. Monica, are you there? No? Okay. Are you there? I'm going to give you one more.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me.
Hello.
My microphone.
Say who you are.
Yes, okay, very quickly. So my name is Monica Frassoni. I'm the president of the European Alliance to Save Energy. I have also a question of state aid. Indeed, there has been relaxation, and the commissioner said it, vice president said it. But I just want to ask you, as there are some parts of the current guidelines of the as far as state aid are concerned, notably, for example, on energy efficiency, which have been proved rather detrimental in unlocking investment and actions. So beside now what's going on in the very short term, would you be ready to reconsider some of the hurdles that were put in the current guidelines, also to foster and to facilitate the famous Green Deal? Because I think that these two things have to be taken in combination. We need to solve, of course, a very short-term disaster, but we need to do it in a way that is sustainable. Thank you.
And so you're saying here's an opportunity to look at state aid in the roundest sense to make it, future-proof for greening the deal, if you like, but also lifting some of what you're describing, potentially, in my words, unnecessary barriers and hurdles. Commissioner Margrethe, can I ask you now to respond to some of those issues? Again, as I said to our respondents, I'll need you to be fairly brief so that I can, because there's so many other people who want to speak to you and ask you questions. So in order to do that, I need you to be brief. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much. On Josephine's question on what data is being used, it's really a lot of very different data. It's both sort of data on from member state as to what are the needs. We have a successful public procurement action for masks and gloves and protective gear. Another one coming up for ventilators and test kits.
Right.
Here, member states, they just report their data as such. Some member states are using, to a very large degree, anonymized data from mobile phones to see about people's movements, but of course doing their best to respect people's privacy and the GDPR that is still in place. So I think member states are very careful because there is, of course, a risk that if certain thresholds are are removed in a crisis situation, it can be difficult to get them back up again and to sort of reclaim our privacy. And I think a lot of people are very cautious of exactly that risk.
And on that point, if I can interrupt you, the biggest issue, because the data point about how do you harness data, share data for health systems, but also the move to use data in the way Singapore and South Korea have used, will, I suppose, unpick people's privacy and rights. Can you just say something about what you intend to put in place in terms of safeguarding?
Well, it's not in my portfolio. My colleagues are working intensively on this with member states, and so far, what most member states would push for is exactly to do this in an anonymized form,
Right.
so that it's not the individual who's being followed exactly for the reasons that you mentioned. On Dave's question, well, we still do state aid control. The reason why we have a framework is exactly for things not to just to be, left, right, and center, but to say, well, these are the things that you can do. We have also done a template. For instance, if you want to give people compensation for events that are being cancelled, for things that cannot happen, then there is a template to use so that if you want to do that, you do that very much in the same way. And then, of course, we make sure that when you want to support a business during these very critical weeks and months, that you do not try to sort of reintroduce things that we would otherwise not accept, because that would completely unlevel the playing field. So actually, we have a lot of very traditional state aid work to do, only we do it in a very compressed time, and we do that on the basis of templates and on the basis of a framework that sort of makes sure that member states, they do things in the same way. On Monica's question, well, we are in the process of looking into every one of our state aid guidelines in this year. Part of it will be delayed because of this, because our public consultations cannot take place as they were supposed to do. But one of the reasons why we do this is exactly because of Green Deal. Of course, it's difficult to answer your question specifically because I don't know what it is that you're thinking about, where you find that there are barriers. One of the things that will remain in place, so to speak, is sort of the benefits of state aid control. First, that you get things as cheap as possible, because that allows you to do more. Second, that you do not crowd out private investments, because we cannot do this with public money alone. We really do need private investment as well. And last but not least, that we still have fair competition, because that will provoke and enable the innovation that we need at the same time. So these are, of course, the sort of the guiding principles that this we still want to make happen. But that being said, we're in the process of looking into basically everything we do. And on your notes, on the build-up, of course, it would be kind of crazy to first say, no, let's rebuild the old world and then start to green it and make it more digital. No, we have to start with the new starting point that we have when the health crisis is over, to green and to digitalize our societies to the benefit of how our societies work.
Very good to hear. I want to bring our citizens in a moment, actually, because we have a debating platform called Debating Europe, where we have over 5 million citizens across Europe who engage on a regular basis on European matters that matters to them, of policy and their own livelihoods. I'll bring them in a second. There was an issue whilst you're there on this particular point about data and health. We had a question from one of our MEPs here who's joined us about the importance to share data and create a data sharing infrastructure of health in Europe. Is this one of the debates you're having amongst your colleagues right now about when we get, one of the lessons here is we're really poor at sharing data. And if the system had actually got the infrastructure in place, we might move better forward in the medium to long term, because these crises are going to hit us in the short term much more than we anticipated before. Anything on health data sharing?
Well, actually, that is part of our data strategy for Europe, to create a space for health related data, exactly for these reasons. But this was already planned before the
Okay.
health crisis broke out, exactly for these reasons, because we can provide better health, better prevention of diseases, also diseases like this, if we share data in a different way. And the health data space is kind of a metaphor for the standards that need to be in place, and also sort of the contractual agreements between different health providers in order for them to be able to share their data in a safe way.
Sure.
And of course, in particular, when it comes to health, where a lot of data is very, very sensitive,
Yeah.
this will have to be constructed in a way where people give a very obviously informed consent if data is being exchanged,
Yeah.
or with possibilities of anonymizing them. But just to give you one example of the challenges here, I visited in Tübingen, one of the amazing places where they do personalized medicine. They have this incredible machinery that they have actually in my home country as well in one location. And one of the things that they had to do was tediously to agree on the format in which they would register their data in order to be able to exchange them and have the double amount of data available when they wanted to get sort of, a fast learning experience from the things that they were doing. So this is already set in motion, but of course now I guess everyone see that it will be indeed needed and a very, very important tool to advance our health systems and what we can do for citizens,
indeed.
in particular in crisis situations.
Absolutely, and I think people have been very aware of the benefits of the sharing, but the issue has been politics, economics, and the issue of privacy. But let's hope this crisis will overcome some of that. I wanted to go to Joe from our Debating Europe platform, who has a question from our citizens. Joe, can I ask you, invite you in? Where are you, Joe?
Hi, there we go. Hi, this is I'm Joe Littlebask. I'm the editor of Debating Europe, which is Friends of Europe Citizens platform. And for most citizens, obviously, this crisis has absolutely upended their lives. I mean, it's incredibly disruptive for everybody. And we had a lot of questions on that, ways to kind of minimize that disruption. So one question came in from Heidi, who's seen other countries such as China and Singapore using technology to fight the virus. She really thinks technology, including AI, data, communications technology, is the key to beating the virus while minimizing disruption to normal life. So what's your message to citizens on this? How can we use technology to fight the coronavirus?
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Well, we can really do a lot. For instance, a lot of the research that is now ongoing use this high-performance computing capacity that has been made available. It was under the leadership of Maria Gabriel in the last mandate that we really pushed for creating this capacity in Europe. When the crisis broke in China, it wasn't only medical equipment and masks that we as Europeans sent to China. It was also working with them and enabling them to use our computing capacity to map out what was ongoing. And that, of course, is very important to be able to do that, because that can accelerate not only research results, but also sharing of research results, so that researchers can share more and inform each other. So instead of having a lot of scattered efforts, that we can have a more concentrated one. And I think what we're seeing now will also be part of a breakthrough for artificial intelligence in health, because there will be a lot of data and there will be a lot of models being developed right now in order to have a better understanding of how the different measures that we now all will have to abide to, how they work when it comes to the spread of a virus like this. Because I think everyone realizes that this will not be the last time that the planet is faced with a pandemic, and we really need to learn and to be much better prepared next time a thing like this is breaking out.
Thank you very much for that. I want to bring in, I think we have Karen Melkoye. Are you there, Karen?
Yes, I am.
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Karen Melchior. I'm a member of the European Parliament from Radicale Venstre, which is a member of Renew Europe. My question is whether we need a specific legal framework in order to deal with the use of data and artificial intelligence and other new technologies to try and control and perhaps stop a future epidemic or pandemic.
Okay, I think let's go back to Commissioner. I think you've touched a little bit on that, but do you want to just expand very briefly in response to the question from Karen?
Well, I think in general, we need a specific framework for artificial intelligence because some part of artificial intelligence is absolutely wonderful and no questions to be asked. But other kinds of artificial intelligence may sort of start, eroding the foundation of very fundamental values. And here, of course, it's important that we know what we're doing. That the quality of the data used to build that kind of artificial intelligence is sufficiently high, that there's no inbuilt bias in how the artificial intelligence is working, that there is a reliability when the algorithms are fed with new data. So I think that we need a specific legal framework to make sure that all the good things that we can do with AI, that we can do that in a way where we can actually trust what is ongoing, because I think we all see now how important trust is in order to do this. The reason why we stay at home, that we keep a distance, is of course that we trust our authorities in what they say and what they ask us to do. And that trust is our most important tool in fighting the pandemic. And that of course should also be present when we use technology and we get better and better in using technology, that we still have the trust that this is done in a way that protects us as humans and our human values.
Absolutely. I mean, as data increasingly frames everything about us in our society and our social lives and our private and public lives, I suppose trust is a key component of the social contract between state and citizen. And I suppose at the moment what we know is anyone with a smartphone will have their data already privatized. We know that companies like Google, Facebook, etc. have hundreds and millions and billions of data already on us. And I suppose there's a kind of interesting point here about how that privatized data can be worked in partnership with the public sector to make kind of social good in terms of tracking both how we think about mobility of citizens and the impact of the disease more widely. And I wonder if you want to make any reference to that before I move on to a couple more questions that we have, because I know people have raised this issue time and time again.
Well, for me personally, it's very important that we find a balance here. Because I think that the empowered citizen who are trusted to do the right thing is a much better agent for safety and health than the citizens who feel completely coerced and controlled and in the risk of having a fine or prison sentences. So it's a balance here, how data can be used on the one hand side to control the virus and the pandemic, while still maintaining fundamental values that makes our societies what they are.
Indeed.
Because this is a new situation, but we still have the values that has built our societies. And we want to come back to a society that may have changed, but not have changed in the fundamental way, that we still have a sense of individuality and that you have rights that should not be undermined.
Absolutely. But I suppose in people's minds, whilst they're dealing with this tragedy and this crisis, they will not also forget the fact that their privacy has been invaded. And we've seen all those cases of how data has been shared without people's acknowledgement or even awareness. And I suppose that's where the role of government will come into the future, in making sure there's sufficient checks and balances as we move through this crisis. But I want to bring in three contributors now who've raised their hands. So I've got, and again, each of you, can I ask you to be brief so we can then move on to others? So I've got Matthew Caruana from Malta. Is that right? Matthew, are you there?
Yes, that's right.
Welcome, Matthew. Can you just say who you are? And also, just for the rest of the people, as I now recognize, you are also a European Young Leader in our class of 2020. And I promise people, we're not privileging our European Young Leaders in this. I assure you. Matthew, over to you. Say who you are.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Caruana Galizia. I run the Daphne Caruana Galizia Foundation, which is named after my mother, the journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, who was murdered in 2017. Now, the reason that my mom was murdered because was because she was investigating corruption in a massive gas energy infrastructure project in Malta. Now, this project was given approval on state aid rules by the Commission in 2014. And my question is whether since then, now that the corruption in the project has been exposed, now that the reason for my mother's murder has been exposed, has the Commission triggered an internal investigation to figure out how this project passed its controls and passed through its internal procedures and was given the go-ahead in order to prevent anything like this from happening again, especially now that huge injections of state aid are being made and the risk of state aid money being funneled to organized criminal groups is increasing.
Matthew, thank you. You build on the point that the Commissioner was just talking about, but Margrethe was talking about, is trust. Because I think trust is one of the almost like the guiding points and guiding words and phrases for our times at the moment. And the point you make about state aid is going to be key in a whole range of areas. So can I ask you to deal with that very briefly, Margrethe, then I'll move on to others.
Well, first of all, Matthew, still very, very sorry about your loss, because it's a loss for every one of us, for you personally, of course, the most, but for everyone, because the work done by your mom and independent journalism is basically what we need. Without that, I think our democracy would fall apart. That critical approach is what needed, and I'm touched and very happy to hear the strong way you have picked it up, what she left you. What we do is, when we do a state aid approval, is to look at if there is not, put more money in than absolutely needed to make the project work, that when the project is working, that is not disturbing competition in the marketplace, here the market for energy. If fraud and corruption then takes place, it is for Olaf to investigate that. What we're trying to do, of course, in these days where a lot of state aid is being given out, is of course to insist on transparency, that all these schemes, it's made transparent, so taxpayers know where their money is going, and that journalists can keep asking critical questions. Is this done in the right way? Was this done with in the way that it was intended to happen? Because only then the social contract can be maintained. And I think that is what we see now in most member states, that journalists, they ask critical questions as to how authorities and governments, they are managing this crisis, what they do to keep us healthy. And that is a sign of a healthy society, that this is the way things are ongoing. And that is what creates trust in democracy, that we still have the transparency and the room for criticism, even in times as stressful as these ones.
Indeed, and I suppose what we're pointing to here is that we need a much more bolstered freedom of information type regime in Europe, backed by legislation, but also the ability of scrutiny panels that are not the usual suspects in bids or multi-million-pound state aid projects, which brings in a citizen, a journalist, and a range of other community organizations, that you could actually change the model of how we think about state aid being scrutinized.
But I tell you, the thing I hear the most is that we are way too annoying, way too granular in the questions we ask, in order to make sure that things are as they are supposed to be, and that we are too demanding in our asks for transparency as to where money is going, and that things are actually successful in the way that it is set up. But we can only do our job if there is still an active press, if there is still a transparency in what governments they are doing. In that respect, the institution where I have the responsibility is part of a democracy and not above it.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you very much. And I hope that message, those of you journalists who are online and watching this, I hear that message very loud and clear, because as you say, I think the power of journalism is to hold truth to power, and long may it live and actually be the thing that it was invented to be in the first place. I now have Paolo Chiricosi, if I've got the name right. Are you there, Paolo?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please introduce yourself.
Perfect. Paolo Chiricosi, I'm the head of competition and state aid of Enel Group, so energy company. I'm afraid that there can be a slowdown of the working program of all the competition authorities, and in particular DG Competition in this
Okay,
field.
I'm sure the issue of competition is going to come back and forth. Thank you very much for that, Paolo. Margrethe, the issue of competition is going to come up time and time, as is the state aid framework, as is data sharing. This is another part of that jigsaw puzzle, if you like. Your views on what you've just been hearing from Paolo?
Well, this is very important. On the one hand side, as days are passing on, it's increasingly important, for instance, that the food value chain is working.
Sure.
And here we may see that retailers, wholesalers, prime producers will have to work together in unprecedented manners in order to make sure that the food is still in the shops. So here we have said with every national competition authority, of course, cooperation for this specific purpose in these specific times is of course absolutely legal. But we will stay, more, maybe even more vigilant than in normal times if we find that there is a risk of what you could call sort of virus profiteering.
Yes.
That we see people who sort of think that under the radar, in these extreme times, they can do things that they should not do. And that, of course, goes for everyone. That goes for a small cartel in one member state, but that also goes for big tech, that we, of course, stay vigilant that a crisis is not a shield against competition law enforcement.
Well said. Thank you very much for that. That's very, very reassuring, I'm sure, to many people. And I suppose the issue for you will be whether you've got the capacity internally and through the network of member states to be able to move in the direction that you're setting. And that's going to be a political challenge, but something to think about and come back to in your final remarks. I've got Andrew Piace. Andrew? Where are you, Andrew?
Yeah, yes, thanks very much.
Please do introduce yourself.
Yes, my name's Andrew Pease. I'm lead data Pease. No problem. Lead data scientist at Deloitte, and my question is specifically about the general populace and their interpretation of the statistics that we're being bombarded with. I think it's really important that they become informed consumers of such statistics, because it's very hard for some people to understand basic concepts. I realize that they're not basic for everybody, like exponentiality and relative data figures from different countries. I wonder if there's a platform for data scientists like myself to contribute to the growth of knowledge in that particular, as I say, basic knowledge of statistics for being informed consumers to help grow that in these very critical times.
And so, Andrew, I'm assuming this is not hustling business. You're going to be
You're
being a good citizen. You're being a good citizen, saying, "I'm going to rally around other data scientists to help Margrethe and others to create a more informed platform." So there you go. What an offer, Margrethe. What's your response to that?
Well, it's interesting that you say this. I was just thinking about Hans Rosling, who died quite recently.
Yes.
And his concept.
Fantastic book.
Yes, and his concept of factfulness. Because his idea was that not only should you have the facts, but they should also be presented to you in a way that it's actually, immediately digestible, that you can really learn from it without having a very scientific or educated background. Because if not, then facts is just something that prevents you from understanding. I'd say go away instead of something inviting you to understand. And I think that the papers, sort of more traditional news outlets, actually are doing quite a good job in exactly trying to make us digest what is going on, because we are confronted with graphics that I think most people thought they were never ever going to see, exactly about sort of the curves, and flattening the curve has been something that everyone is saying to one another. But indeed, I think whatever platform that you have access to, it's a good thing to participate in the debate and say, well, this is how I see it, this is how this should be understood, and that we share with one another how data can be interpreted, so that we get sort of access to the scientific basis of managing this extreme situation where so many vulnerable people are put in jeopardy.
Absolutely. I think the ease with which the death toll numbers, the infection toll numbers, words like flattening the curve and peak moments, the ease with which that's entered our language without question is phenomenal. But actually the point is, it behoves a government and others to really think long and hard about the fact that this could be nullifying and you become inured to it very easily. But how do you prevent information that's, as you say, Andrew, consumable, doesn't actually create panic, but enables people to understand what is actually being said and understanding where we're going on this. But on that note, the press are obviously key to this. So I've got Natalia Brodziak from Bloomberg. Where are you, Natalia?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for
again, like everybody, please do introduce yourself.
Natalia Drozdyak from Bloomberg. I cover technology based here in Brussels, and just wanted to say thank you again for organizing this, and to the Commissioner for taking the time. My question was about the AI white paper. I'm wondering whether the pandemic is changing your approach at all in terms of regulating AI. In the paper, you talk about regulating high-risk applications, for instance, but could there be a risk in not fast-tracking certain solutions that could save lives, for instance?
Okay, thank you very much. Before you come on to this one, Margrethe, I'm going to ask Philip. Philip May-Sensier, are you there, Philip? Philippe?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Hi. Can you just introduce yourself, please, for the audience?
Well, and again, my thanks.
You need to speak up.
Thanks to you and the Commissioner for taking the time this morning.
That's better.
For being with us. I'm Philippe Massensier, the Managing Director of McClarty Associates in Brussels. A very quick, short question. What is the impact of the crisis on your policy agenda? Will there be re-prioritization? This agenda was really at the heart of this Commission's mandate in terms of the impact on the lives of EU citizens and, of course, EU businesses. What will be changing or not? Thank you.
Very big question. Short, but very big question, Philippe. Thank you very much for that. Margrethe, I'm going to... AI and regulation, and actually, I suppose we began with this to a certain extent, is about what does this context do to your portfolio and the prioritizing or otherwise of it in relation to citizens. Over to you.
Well, first and foremost, I think that our very point in our AI paper was to say, we embrace this new technology. We can do amazing things with artificial intelligence, but we want to be able to trust it. And I think that line of thinking is as relevant as ever, because trust is the most important thing that we have in order both to get through the crisis, but also to rebuild businesses and jobs for the future. So I think that fundamental approach should be the same. And that was what led us to say, well, for some types of technology that poses our fundamental values at risk, we will need regulation. I think that still holds to be true. The thing is, for what Philip was asking, now we do everything in a digital way. We have digital work, a lot of people, we have digital socializing, we have digital welfare. I heard the other day they were offering counseling for alcoholics in a digital way.
Indeed.
Yes. So everyone is trying to manage with the tools that we have available. But and digital learning, of course, in particular, millions and millions of school children and students, they now have their schooling in a digital way. So the starting points for digitalizing what we do and make the most of technology is, of course, changing. And I think also now in this awful situation, one of the few silver linings is that a lot of people is enjoying fresh air. Because pollution has more or less disappeared. So I think we also get another sort of appreciation of the benefits of greening our economy, of fighting pollutions, of having a different footprint. I think a lot of people are much more cautious with resources. When you have to queue in front of the supermarket in order to be let in, you think more about what you buy and how you use it. So we also, when it comes to being a climate neutral continent, we get a different starting point.
Sure.
So in the rebuild, I think it's very important that we think, how can we then leapfrog our strategic priorities of being a climate neutral continent and making the most of technology to make our societies better. And in that respect, we can revitalize if we do it right and make sure that the many, many businesses, from the very small ones to the giant ones who are suffering right now, that we get them through this crisis situation.
Sure. And what we've learned about this crisis is about ourselves. It's brought out both the worst in us, but also the best in us. And there's going to be a sense of everyone, their eyes are going to be on you and your colleagues, really, to come together in a way that is both proactive, leader-like, and actually saying we've got a grip on this, and people need to see this and feel it and perceive it, if you like. But perhaps again, I'll bring you in for your concluding remarks to make a comment on that, because I think that's been one of the issues for people, is that where have you been as a college, because of the differences in what's happened in Italy, Spain, elsewhere, and felt there's a feeling that the union hasn't been as quick, collaborative, and proactive as it could have been. And I suppose the other issue is that, is it time now to really do away with this notion of a single market and a digital single market? Is it time really to call it a spade and say, actually, just have one market that's digital? But let's come back to that. I've got three other contributors. Alexander Perez.
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm from Spain. I'm an engineer. I'm the founder of Altius, a think tank that analyzes the impact of technology for society, and also Fever, a tech startup with over 250 employees across European countries and the US.
Okay.
And my question is regarding European tech champions. So I was just thinking, as we were speaking, so we are currently using Zoom, which is a US headquartered company. We are mostly using, probably for this conference, like softwares and laptops and smartphones that have not been developed in Europe for the most part. And this is something that I've seen as part of your policy priorities, as a big strategic priority.
Okay,
to
get to your point.
this.
I need you to get to your point. Sorry, Alexander.
So my question is, in light of the current crisis, I've seen across multiple European countries, each government is implementing very different policies and packages to help. And this becomes another example of a huge challenge for European startups like us to be able to compete on a level playing field with our colleagues in the US and in China. So I think that this temporary framework that you established a few days ago is very useful, but still I think that providing guidelines to governments could be even more helpful to create some uniformity. Is there
Okay,
something
so it
that you
goes
are
back to
trying
that
to
point about
develop
the
on that
single
side?
market in terms of making sure it actually works, but you want a framework that's consistent across Europe. And I suppose the issue is there's a kind of a quid pro quo here, because the Commissioner can only do so much if national governments are not prepared to listen, I suppose, which is not to kind of to support you unnecessarily, but that's the reality of the union at one level. I'm going to take two more very quickly. So we have Kushita Vasant. Kushita, are you there?
Hi.
Oh, there's a bit of a blowback there. Are you coming back?
Yes, hi. I'm actually speaking through another account I made just to log in for this. Can you hear me?
Very well. Say who you are.
Hi, Commissioner Kushita here from PAR. I have a two-part question. I'll keep it quick. In relation to the FDI announcement this week, are there any specific concerns about Europe's digital industry that made the Commission move so quickly? And just in terms of digital enforcement, the Commission, DG Comp had fast-moving attempts to bring the policy agenda up to date with all the member states, including ex-ante remedies. I was wondering, because of COVID-19, are these policy considerations now on the back burner? Thank you.
Okay, great. Before I can bring you back, Commissioner, Cristina Pozzi, are you there?
Yes, here I am.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi. Thank you.
Do introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm a CEO of Impact School. We are active in education about new emerging technologies and also dissemination and communication.
And where are you based right now? Where are you? Which part of sunny Europe are you in?
In Italy.
In Italy.
And actually, my question was about envisioning the future. This is something that we do also with Impact School. And so given that in the strategy, we are aiming to a single data market and sharing health data. I was wondering, how would you envision the situation that we are living today if we already had that kind of platform, just to see how do you think it could help us in 5-10 years time if something similar happens? How would things go differently? I know it's a speculation, but I think it's useful to understand.
Christina, to help the Commission understand, what do you want?
Sorry?
What would you like?
Well, I'd like to see, of course, collaboration between the states.
Right.
And our privacy under control, in particular with health data, which are the most important data we need to share. And also more statistics that can be really useful in order to make better decisions, as I believe that today there is not uniformity about how we are collecting data about this crisis. And I think this is being also a problem because it's difficult to really confront different situations in the States.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I just want to check if we've got any questions on Zoom. No, we haven't at all. Okay, great. So now, in the last 5 minutes, I want to give the space to you, Margrethe, to both respond to some of those questions, but also some of the issues I've raised, which are the more kind of the bigger picture ones about the market leadership of you as a team. As you work through, because people do want to see and feel and get a sense of the college working differently as well. So, but firstly, there's questions, the first that we just heard, and then if you want to conclude with some remarks about the points that I've made before.
Yes, on Alexander's question about technology, how to compete within Europe, how to compete both with Chinese and US champions. One of the things, of course, that is important is that we have not only just a digital single market and another single market, but we think about it as one single market so that there's sufficient room to grow. Because one of the reasons why we have Chinese big tech is the Chinese single market.
Indeed.
And one of the reasons why we have US big tech is that we have a US single market. So one of the important things is, of course, to make sure that as we rebuild, that we rebuild as one market. Also because many businesses,
Very good to hear.
They
Sorry.
will transform into being both sort of maybe a manufacturing company, but they will also have a digital side as to what they do. On Kusita's question, well, on the contrary, actually, we're trying to move forward our considerations about what to do ex ante, because to be able to say, well, this is how the market should function when it's still open and competitive and innovative, that has become even more urgent than it was before. So that is very crucial for us to be able to do that. As you say, we have given guidance on how to screen foreign direct investments because we find that there is a risk that if European businesses are vulnerable, they are more at risk of a hostile takeover.
Indeed.
So this is why this is important, that we stay vigilant on that as well, which is also why we work intensively on our ideas for how to prevent acquisitions that is backed by subsidies from foreign states. Because that, of course, is a big problem for a level playing field, because a European business cannot acquire another business with the state backing their credits or providing the capital. On Christiana's last question, well, I think the strange thing for me, I was part of also European policy when we had to address the financial crisis. And that was a mess in the beginning. It took European member states quite some time before we came together and found agreement and found ways to make sure that it could be managed. Despite of all the differences that has been seen here, I think since this crisis is so different, that is such an immediate threat to human lives and to the social contracts of being a citizen in a country where there is a health system and a welfare system that will take care of you, we are coming together faster. And hopefully this will teach us that we cannot prevent the next crisis, but what we can teach ourselves is how we work together. Because this is the most important tool next to trust in each other and what we do. That is the way we cooperate. And this leads me to the last part of your question, well, what do you actually do? Because what my colleagues have been doing over the last couple of weeks is, of course, first to work to take down the barriers that member states had been putting up, to work with member states to stop the export bans, to introduce green lines at border crossings so that trucks can pass easily, because every truck that comes with goods comes there for a reason, because they are needed in the value chain. To establish public procurement so that we can get supplies of these things that are urgently needed for our health workers, the protective gear, the testing capacity. It is heartbreaking to see the lack of ventilators in Italy, in Spain. It's
Indeed.
Unbelievable what citizens have had to face. That we build up, and colleagues who have been working with industry for them to change their production. One of the things that we change now is that we set up so that a government can give a no-loss guarantee for a business that may usually produce perfume or vodka, but will now be producing hand sanitizers.
Indeed.
Or those who usually produce clothes, that they produce masks and protective gloves and coats instead, that they can have a no-loss guarantee for what they do. So every one of my colleagues has been either mending things that were breaking or about to break, or organizing cooperation between member states. And every morning we have a morning meeting, of course, led by the president, so that everyone is coordinated as to what is ongoing. Of course, with other European institutions, what Christine Lagarde has put forward is extremely impressive. First 120 and now 750 billions available for buying, for instance, bonds. And that's together with what individual member states have done. And yesterday, the European Parliament voted to enable unused structural funds to go into fighting coronavirus. Then the European response is actually bigger than the US response. It is, of course, slightly different because we have these, what we call sort of stabilizers. We do unemployment benefit. We have a social benefit.
Indeed.
That works a lot. But what we have done with liquidity and in total, well, that can more than match what they do in the US. And we will do more in the days and weeks to come. But I think it's important to appreciate that we actually do some things together. Because I understand completely why you see the things that doesn't work in such a stressful situation when lives are at stake. I understand that completely.
Yeah.
But it is important that we also recognize not only what individuals do, but also what countries do and what countries do together to a still increasing degree. Because when this health crisis is managed, it's because we work together. And when we raise ourselves and create a green and digital Europe, it will be because that we work together. That is our mission. And this is how I see everyone now coming to be on the same page.
Commissioner Margrethe, thank you for being with us. I think the words you've been using consistently about trust and transparency are key, but so is accountability in the triangle of the social contract. It's a nexus there that we need to get right. And I think, as I said, all eyes will be on you and your team. I hope that you're keeping a journal or a diary or someone's looking at this, because one of the things that we've learned is that we don't know how to respond to this. There's nothing in our leadership responsibilities or experiences, whether we've run a company or a government, has prepared us for this. And there's something about documenting what you're doing, the lessons learned, and what you can pass on to the next generation of political leaders that will have to come through these crises time and time again. And I hope that in terms of the massive bailouts that are taking place, one of the lessons we learned from the past is to actually make sure that they're green-proofed and accountability-proofed in that sense, because one of the issues has been that the bailouts didn't do that last time. And we've heard many, many times that with this massive quantitative easing, let's make sure there are some green lines and not red profit lines underneath it. But thank you very, very much for your time. And I hope you found this useful. From your perspective, I hope that we can count on you to call you back. It'll be good to speak to you in 6 months' time. Perhaps, hopefully, when we're out of this, but you never know. So we would welcome you to have this kind of engagement, this online engagement, which I know that a lot of the people who've been online have found very effective. Those of you who've joined us, I hope you found it helpful. Please do give a feedback to us if you found it useful, effective, engaging, and you want to come back. So thank you very much, Margrethe, and thank you.